Okay. Do you want a second? You can have a minute.
No. I actually, if I don't take 15 minutes at the end of this time slot and take a shower, then I'm not going to get one today, and that's going to be a problem.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear anything you just said.
No, I got to get this done. I have about 45 minutes before I have to take a shower. Otherwise, I'm not going to get one today.
Okay. I'm having some trouble hearing you.
I'm having trouble hearing you right now. I'm having trouble hearing
you right now.
You shouldn't anymore. I was trying to get my headset on.
Okay, that's better.
So you don't, yeah, it should be.
It is.
I did that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so
let's talk about the value of now.
Yeah. So there is you're going to have to figure out a way to assemble this, because there's so many things to explain with this, and there's not necessarily a sequence. But there is a very strange request that commonly occurs in nature, where leadership of an organization will think that it's a good idea to request of their departments to go get options, to go get different versions of the answer so that they can choose the quote-unquote best version. So I've heard people use analogies like, hey, I want an option that's the F-150. I want the sports coupe, and I want the luxury car, and I want all three of those. And they use car analogies for some reason, and I'm not sure why they do that, because I don't think you could ever gain consensus on what car is the best in each category. I think he would argue with you until the end. So using analogies without a consensus is probably not the best way to describe something. I've also heard people say, hey, I would like a low, medium, and high option. The problem that I have with this approach is that if you have a single set of business objectives and a single set of problems, it's highly unlikely that low, medium, and high is an appropriate way to ever present, or it's just the fallacy of choice. Now, let me give you let me explain further, actually. So
Jay, before you do that, can you just call back in real quick? There's still a lot of just background noise or whatever. It's not clear at all.
All right.
Will you dial back in?
Are you there?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So there's, and the topic again is, just make sure I don't confuse the two. What's the topic again?
Oh, yeah, the topic that we're talking about is the value of now.
Oh, yeah, okay. So there's a couple concepts that are important to understand first. First and foremost, there seems to be this epidemic, and I do not understand how this occurs in nature, but there is this fallacy that people are under that providing options or requesting that IT departments provide them with options is a good idea. Now, the problem with that is they're not really, they're asking for something else, but we respond improperly. Let me give you the analogy that they give often is automobiles. They said, hey, you know, we need to solve this problem, so I'd like the Ford Focus option, the F-150 option, and the BMW option. Okay, well, I'm not really sure what that means. I mean, first of all, I don't like the use of analogies where people that listen to the analogies can't gain consensus on, you know, which of those you know, cars are good and bad, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I'm not a fan of that analogy. You know, they're asking for purchasing options. But what does that mean? What are they actually saying? And so let me go a bit further. So they'll say things like, hey, I want a low, medium, and a high option, like a low cost, a medium cost, and a high cost. Well, if you prescribe a solution to a single set of problems, why would you ever pick anything other than low if it's just as capable of solving the problem? Or were we to infer that low means we sacrifice the integrity of the solution and don't solve all the problems in order to save cost? What's the answer to that? What does low mean? Like, it's an absurd request. Is medium the exact answer with no fluff and nothing less, nothing more? And where high is just a bunch of fluff, solving problems that no one listed that they had, so the cost is higher? I mean, what the hell does that mean? Low, medium, high. What the hell does it mean, Ford Focus, F-150, and BMW? What does that mean? It's an epidemic that seems to make sense somehow to people. And it's absurd. It's obscene. You have one set of problems. You have one set of stakeholders. How could you have three different ways to solve the problem? Because if you have the illusion that there's multiple ways to solve the problem, it's because you haven't explored the problem deep enough. I'm not saying that there is, you can't provide yourself with choices at the end. For example, maybe you want you've come up with a design. It's an awesome design. You have all three, please reference development group's solution pillars. You have all three pillars represented, but maybe you have the design pillar, it's solid design, you have a solid implementation plan, but maybe on sustainability what you do is the initial cost to be lower, you only buy 1 year of support. And maybe the medium one is 3 years, and maybe the high, if you will, is 5 years of support. Those are certainly different costs. When people ask for, when they use the analogy of low, medium, high, or they use the silly analogy of a car, what they're really asking for is consumption options. No one in their right mind would say, please violate the integrity of the solution. Please ignore all of the input from stakeholders and come up with these absurd options that are completely arbitrarily mapped to this ambiguous request of low, medium, and high. So I'm getting to the point, but there's this epidemic that's the request. Now, the thing that's important now is this entire, so how do you deal with that? Well, we deal with that by saying, hey, listen, there's one set of problems, one set of stakeholders. I've spent time interviewing stakeholders. I've spent time understanding stakeholders' issues. And so I am leveraging this project, this massive IT project, or this discussion around what to buy, and I'm holding it accountable to contributing to those business objectives. So that's a proven process. We're leveraging a process to hold ourselves accountable to selecting an actual solution. But we were asked to get consumption options. So like I said before, one way to present consumption options is, hey, 1 year, 3 year, or 5 years of support. Maybe it's 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years of support. And that's consumption options. But I'm not violating the integrity of the solution. I'm simply suggesting that the more sustainability costs you pay up front can give you your consumption options. Another way to do it is, hey, phased approach. Hey, listen, so hey, this idea to fix the problems we have, it's $10 million. Oh my gosh, well, we don't have $10 million. Hey, totally understand, money's money. But let's collaboratively review the business objectives and determine which of these can be moved to subsequent phases. That way we reduce the initial costs without violating the integrity of the overall design. Even though we can't do it all at once, we can at least do so in phases. And maybe, just maybe, that low, medium, and high request can be, hey, if you just want to spend a little bit of money, then that's phase one all by itself. And the subsequent phases will be later. And maybe medium is, hey, we'll do phase 1 and 2 all at once, and the subsequent phases can be later. And maybe the high option is we don't phase it. We do everything at once. So there's a couple concepts before we get into this that the audience needs to be reminded of. Now, can you do me one more favor, because I like the way it was worded, Becky? Can you read the description of? Can you read the title and the description one more time?
Yeah, it's the value of now.
Right.
IT departments are forced to phase in technology, which means problems with sustainability.
Right.
Equity of access is important.
Yeah. Yeah. So the concept of the value of now is if you're leveraging the approach that I just said, and you understand that when people are asking for low, medium, and high, or they're asking for phases, we have to be smart about that, because concurrently we have other business objectives to deal with. For example, superintendents often tell us equity of access is very important. Equity of access. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but primarily it means that we have equal access for our students in our district, regardless of where they're at. I want the education value to be the same. Now, what notoriously happens is that we'll get a couple schools, sometimes the most affluent schools or the schools lucky enough to get a grant, and they get more. Well, okay, please don't read into it, the community, but the fact is that they will, and that's not equity of access. I don't have equity of access if I have 2 schools that have mobile devices, badass wireless, kick-ass internet, access to digital curriculum and formative assessments, and the other schools are still using books. That's going to cause a problem. So how do I take the first thing that I was explaining to you, this concept of equity of access, and merge them together? Well, IT has a responsibility here to try to work towards the strategic objectives expressed by the school district, which is often equity of access. So when I am trying to figure out how to interpret the request of the school district to buy things in phases, or low, medium, and high, or this atrocious car analogy thing, when I am left there to interpret what to do in that situation, I must do so and understand that how I present these options need to still try and maintain the integrity of the solution that's contributing to the expressed objectives, like equity of access. So equity of access. If I say, oh, geez, for district-wide it's $10 million. Well, we can't afford that. Hey, no problem. But if equity of access is one of the business objectives, we can't just take out schools A, B, and C because we can't afford it. We need to consider doing all the schools with this foundational layer of technology. Okay, so let's say that the district had a business objective of successfully deploying digital curriculum with the capacity for real-time formative assessment. Well, that requires wireless, that requires security, that requires switching, that requires cabling, that requires routing, that requires mobile device management. It requires endpoints with a plan. It requires a lot of technology. The technological prerequisites to satisfy that business objectives are enormous. But is it better to just get 3 schools with it, or is it better to just get all the schools ready at the same pace? I don't know. It's time for leadership to decide what equity of access means in the wake of budget shortfalls. Furthermore, I think that it's absolutely important that districts really understand how they purchase this stuff matters. RFPs are exceptionally expensive. Finding people that can sell on contract vehicles will cost the district a lot less money, and not leveraging the double-edged sword bureaucratic E-rate for some of the technology projects will allow you to access assistive purchasing methodology like financing, which E-rate disallows. And so you can get a lot more creative when you hold yourself accountable to giving the district purchasing options while concurrently acknowledging business objectives that were expressed by stakeholders like equity of access, like digital curriculum, like formative assessments and campus safety. Let me ask you this. Let's say the topic was campus safety, and I have 10 schools. Well, which schools do you want to make safe? Is that a smart idea? No, I think what has to happen is when we go present the solutions back to the school districts that had requested low, medium, and high options, but they don't want to go decrease the integrity of what they're solving. And so there may be some intonation or supposition that you should just go solve the problem chiefly, which will violate, by the way, the business objectives more than likely. It's time to discuss creative financing. It's time to discuss vendor manufacturer financing. So if I can't afford it, no problem, but there's tremendously amazing programs out there tailored to public sector entities, especially schools, like technology as a service, where I convert my technology spend to OpEx instead of CapEx. There's different ways to consume this stuff. We have one set of problems. We have one set of objectives. We have one set of stakeholders. How on earth could there possibly be multiple ways to solve the problem? Now, that statement by itself appears to be closed-minded, so we have to be very careful. I'm not trying to kill off innovation. I'm not trying to. It is absolutely required that we're innovative. But at the end of the day, options are not different levels of how bad the solution is, or how you. Reminder that the options that you give to a school district to consume a solution can't be different levels of how bad you violate the integrity. Like I said before, if let's say you propose that the high-cost option is the one that fixes all the problems. Well, what does medium mean? 75% of the problems are solved? What does low mean? 50%? I mean, who gets to choose that? Which, if you have 10 different stakeholders, does everybody contribute 2 objectives that don't matter, or do you just pick 50% of your stakeholders that don't matter? I mean, it's absurd. It's an absurd philosophy, but we see it every day. So the value of now means, like, there's ways to solve your problems now. And when you don't do that, you violate things like equity of access. You literally can put other students in other schools at risk, not only for education risk, but safety risk. We have to solve the problems now. Because the other issue that I see too, and then we should be done because there's too much already, is if you do things in a tremendous amount of phases spread over 5 years, the equipment you often end up with compared to the start from the end, there's 1 or 2, sometimes maybe even 3 generations of equipment, which make it a sustainability problem. But we have to stop introducing sustainability problems by phasing all this stuff out all the time. We have to be smart. Phasing can't be the easy button for I can't afford it, because you give the district other problems, which I would argue and be able to demonstrate that it actually costs the district more money over time to have a bunch of different manufacturers or a bunch of different models or a bunch of different generations of product, because we had to phase things in. I would argue that that costs the districts more and sacrifices integrity of the solution. So the value of now protects our student equity, our equity of access. It protects us from sustainability issues. It allows us to holistically address objectives. And I think those 3 things are very compelling. So that's all I got on that topic. Do you have questions?
No, I think that was really thorough. I think you're right. It's a little disorganized. You did a really good job. It's just the topic itself is kind of hard to tie all those ends together. So that'll be interesting trying to figure that out. But I think you gave me plenty of information. It's just, piecing it together.
Yeah, I'd start from the end. I mean, the end is where the 3 things that the value of now does is kind of maybe start with that summary and then work backwards and grab points to support each topic. Yeah, I think that'd be smart.
Okay. All right, cool. No, I like it a lot. I think that's good. The other one you want to talk about today is this is what no looks like. Yeah,
so, all right, you want to start recording again?
I have never stopped recording.
Okay. So this is what no looks like. So if you leverage a proven process where you are engaging with stakeholders to discover business objectives, and then you develop solutions, you develop a solution that is non-arbitrarily mapped back to those expressed objectives, you have now the benefit of being able to present to your organization their solution, not your proposal. You are presenting their solution because it is their objectives, it is their goals, it is their problems, it is their desires and strategic vision that they've shared with you that you're providing a solution for, on how IT is going to contribute to those things, okay? So when you go develop a solution, please see Exhibit A. A solution is 3 pillars: design, implementation, and sustainability. Otherwise, we shouldn't use that word. But a solution is non-arbitrarily tied back to the expressed objectives of stakeholders. If that's the situation, then if they don't move forward with it, if they don't move forward with the solution, and you did a good job developing a solution, then it's highly likely that the business objectives or the goals that they had expressed will fail. Because if they're going to tell you no, that's okay. Sometimes we have to say no. I get it. Sometimes the timing isn't right. Sometimes politics isn't right. Sometimes the financing isn't right. I get it. I'm not insinuating that people are bad, or this isn't an integrity or character problem. This is simply they said no. But what often happens is IT just goes off and cowers in the corner, you know, and they're frustrated and whatever. But when those problems manifest themselves, there's a professional way to remind the organization that this is what no looks like. Hey, listen, school district, I know that you probably don't want to hear this, but the fact is that we are going to run into problems with standardized testing. We are not going to be able to execute our standardized testing plan with the mobile devices as is, because the wireless network is insufficient, or something about my technology is insufficient. We have to go spend money. We have to go solve this problem. We have to go get creative. Here, based on input from everyone, here is a solution, non-arbitrarily mapped back to expressed objectives. So if they were at that point told no, we're not going to do that, and standardized testing does indeed fail or falter, or we weren't able to execute in the way we expected to, we have to professionally remind people that this is what no looks like. Otherwise, you're just the annoying IT cost center. You're a tactical group of firefighters that are just supposed to show up the fires that you tried to prevent. And exacerbates the problem of losing credibility. Because it seems like most districts forget that they were the leadership that said, no, we're not doing that right now. That was what caused the problem. By not addressing it and accepting risk was a business decision. IT presented a solution to fix it. The business side, the admin side, said no. So when those problems show up, that's what no looks like. And IT, unfortunately, even in the wake of having told the organization that they were at risk, even in the wake of that, IT often and very unfairly loses credibility because the quote-unquote system is down. I just saw this happen. I have a district that has a very, very, very old voice over IP system that has been out of support for many years. IT is begging for something to happen because the redundant system is down, and they are literally one of many single points of failure away from being thrown into the dark ages with no phones, no ability to call 911, no ability to access paging, no but to do anything, because they are literally precariously sitting well beyond the line of good taste. But the district's business office continues to accept that as a risk. Now, I'm not going to go into why they're doing that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The statement is true, though. This is what no looks like. When the system fails, and it will, it absolutely will, because the risk is no longer acceptable, and it will fail. I just pray that nothing dramatic happens in the several weeks that they won't have phone. So, that's an example of what no would look like. And that's not an acceptable risk. And so you know, we as IT leaders or business leaders must challenge ourselves to be better at presenting risk. What is the risk? So there's certain things we have to spend money on for compliance purposes. There's certain things that we have to spend money on for contractual purposes. But there's also spending that requires us to innovate and solve problems to reduce risk. I mean, we don't actually, you know, in an ideal world, we don't need a lot of the technology or the campus safety things that we spend money on. But it's about how much risk do you want to take. We put locks on the doors because we don't want to take the risk of people being bad people and going into a building or classroom or that doesn't belong to them after hours and stealing things. So not having a lock on the door is an easy example of an unacceptable risk. We are not accepting the fact that we aren't going to put locks on the door. But when something like technology, and it's hard to understand, seems to often get ignored, why? Is that deficient IT leadership? Is that deficient administrative leadership? I don't know, but we have to figure that out because you know that often represents unacceptable risk. And so the statement of this is what no looks like is when we get into those situations where the things that we're forecasting do happen, that there was a conscientious decision of not doing something about it. And that risk, unfortunately, doesn't go our way. That's what no looks like. I am not insinuating that we say, I told you so. But there's a moment of opportunity and a moment of power when we professionally remind the organization that this is unfortunate, that the situation happened, this was the risk that we took, but this is what no looks like. So now let's do something about it. So it's, you know.
Okay, I'm going to pause you right there.
Yeah.
Hold, please. What would be super cool in this blog is if we could put like a script or template for that discussion, like right in the middle of the blog.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, let's try it out.
Because you gave us kind of a light version of that. I think you should go just a little bit more in depth in what you literally just said.
Yeah, well, so let's tee up the script a little bit. So assuming that some presentation has been made in the past to address a deficiency or to address a risk or to address a need, and there's been a conscientious decision to not do anything about it.
Yes.
Okay, so now, to further tee it up, whatever situation we were trying to avoid has happened, right? Now,
yeah, like the phones went out in that example you used.
Right,
the
phones went out. So you're not going to get a call about it. It's probably going to be on your cell phone maybe. But the conversation is like this. It said, oh my God, the system's down. Yes, we're aware of that. We're going to do the best we can. However, please note that this was the situation that we were trying to avoid and that we as leadership decided to accept this risk. So please understand, I do not have an immediate plan to recovery. There's no we may be able to get you back up and running, but it's still not going to satisfy the business objectives. This is unfortunately the risk that we took. This is what no looks like. Now, we have to do so in a professional way. So the conversation, can be, look, I'm sorry this happened. I think that we all understand after previous presentations that this was a risk that the district has chosen to accept. At this point, I recommend that we do one of the three following things. And depending on the severity of that, it is going to depend on what you recommend. But but an IT department has to be poised and ready to go with an emergency solution, and it may cost a lot, but they have to be poised and ready to go with an emergency solution to deal with the fact that someone said no. We can't just throw up our hands and say, "Oh, I told you so, good luck." We can't do that. We have to, in our pockets, we have to have ready to go the solution to get us out of the situation, to buy us time to go do it right. So what does that look like? Well, it depends on the technology that failed. It depends on the criticality. It depends on the timing in the school year. It depends on a lot of different things. But a good IT leader that was told, no, we can't address those problems, must be ready with emergency planning, because if it's actually a risk worth fighting for, then it's a risk worth having a plan for if we're not going to go fix it the right way. Does that make sense? So the conversation then would look like, hey, yes, this is the situation. As you recall, this is the technologies that we were discussing about where we've decided to do nothing about. So this was a risk that we took. However, at this point, because I had calculated that IT had calculated that this was a high risk, meaning it was highly probable that I needed to come up with that additional solution. We need to immediately do this plan. And if you aren't in that situation, then you will lose credibility. There's a moment of opportunity and a moment of power in the wake of failure, especially when that failure was because of not addressing it with a plan previously presented. Does that make sense? There's a moment of power and opportunity.
Yes, and you have that power. You only get the power if you have a backup plan in place.
That's right.
Solve the problem.
That's right. Otherwise, you're just going to be little firefighters that are tactically trying to put the forest fire out when you need to get back in the captain's chair and be in charge. And sometimes you just need to, hey, when the organization cannot fund a project to address a risk, you must have a plan to deal with that risk or that issue in an emergent situation. And so this is what no looks like. So that's just a stark reminder that we decided to accept the risk as an organization. Like, we are dealing with our decisions. Because we also don't want to lose credibility as an IT department. We don't want to rub it in their face, because that's not professional. This isn't an I told you so moment. This is we collaboratively decided to accept this risk when we didn't do this project. That said, here's the plan for it failing in an emergency, which is likely going to cost them a lot more, ironically. But that was a risk that they decided to accept. But that's the 1-2 punch.
And I know you have to get going, so I'm going to make this the last question. I feel like we do have some really good info for a vlog, but I have one last question. When is the I told you so moment? It seems like that also has to be included.
Let's definitely not call it the I told you so moment. I get your point, but okay. It's when you're having a discussion with the business leaders. Say, hey, listen, when we as a district decided to say no to that project, we accepted this as a risk. That said, we spent time trying to determine what we would do if that risk became a reality. And here's what we have to do. And we have to do it immediately. And you have to have a plan ready to go. And that plan might not be to solve the problem forever. It could be to triage the problem. But the thing is if you just triage the problem, you spend a little bit of money, or probably a lot of money, depending on the technology, but you spend a lot of money in duress to go triage the problem. The thing that people need to understand is that it's a triage. Like if you go into the emergency room and a triage nurse addresses your wounds and just gets you stabilized, a lot of people will be lulled into a false sense of security at that point and lose focus on solving the problem in a permanent way. So it's very important that you have the discussion. This is what no looks like. So I have a triage solution. I have an emergency solution, but we need to meet after we get it up and running, or we get to an acceptable point. Please understand that it's very temporary, and we must do something else about it, which I am ready to discuss with you.
Got it. That's cool. Yeah. Love it.
So, cool. Well, thanks for your time this morning.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. This is good. I'm excited.
All right, cool. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.